Hello, welcome to the Realtors, episode 15. Can you believe that?
15, big 15. Good morning. How's it going, David?
It's good. It's good. My week is going well. We've got just a little time left here in the month, getting some deals done, trying to get some properties under contract. Yeah, coming into the last first month of the last quarter. I think it's going to be good. I'll do some prep work on not only what I'm working on actively, but obviously both of us kind of working towards what we're going to do the first of the year. You know, you're going into a new year here pretty soon. It's going to be here before you know it. Yeah, all good things.
No, that's great. Yeah, it's been crazy since the hurricane, just dealing with a lot of issues around re-inspects and insurance, as we're going to be talking about today, and just really lining up the game plan and roadmap for next year, right? What can close this year, great. What isn't going to close this year is just playing out for next year and just setting the right expectations with clients for next year, and making sure they're ready and motivated, to hit the market hard and want to fulfill their dreams and goals. So yeah, it's all about next year at this point. Oh,
Oh,
but more important piece, this weather, right? Florida is
yeah,
finally getting some cool weather, man. I'm gonna have
I
to
know.
pull out my beanie. I'm gonna be wearing
Yeah,
a beanie in these episodes.
we're in the perfect. I mean, this is the perfect time of year for me. We get cool weather, not cold, not freezing. I think we probably my area probably more so than yours. I think with Northeast Florida, we're pretty close to the Georgia, Florida Georgia line. So we get some nippy weather, but not freezing. We'll have maybe a few days like that, but just extremely comfortable between this time of year all the way through through December and January. February, I think, is actually our coldest month, which is kind of odd. But that's actually one of our coldest time periods. I mean, you can wear shorts. You can wear shorts at Christmas, around in our climate. So just what it is.
Right, right.
So I did have a thing we were talking about earlier, that we'll kind of talk about for a minute. Want to get some of your take on it is cancellations. So cancellations are something that none of us want uh, to deal with, but it's a big part of real estate. It happens all the time as far as cancellations. And so we're going to just talk a little bit about, for our viewers, kind of the when and why cancellations happen, and we can kind of look at it from both sides, from either the seller side and what a seller does in that situation, versus versus a buyer. I'll take I'll take the selling side, and then I'll throw in some buyer, and then give me what's your thoughts on it. So on my side this week, I was actually on the listing side, so I was representing the seller. We had a transaction where we had multiple offers on the property, which is a little unusual in the current market, but we were fortunate enough to get about six offers on this property. We took what we felt was the best offer at the time, because it had the least contingencies. It was the highest price. And then ultimately, what ended up happening is they did the home inspections. They came back. We were doing an as is deal, which just simply means that the seller is putting that buyer on notice that, okay, you can do the inspections if you like, but I'm not going to make any kind of repairs to the property. Now, that's not to say that you can't come back and request repair credits or things like that, but they just didn't want to get involved in doing the actual repairs, because the property was a little bit of a fixer upper. So they did the inspection, contacted the agent. Agent says, hey, we've got some things on here, items of concern. And then they came back to us later and said, they thought about it. We didn't really get pricing on any of the items, but we're going to go ahead and cancel. So you have a window when you submit a contract as to how quickly you're going to have the property inspected, and then you typically have about a week after the property is inspected in which to it's another negotiation, with both parties, where you come back together and you say, okay, this is what we found deficient about the property. Are you willing to fix this? Are you willing to give a credit? And in that case, we actually weren't given that opportunity because they just felt like it was going to be a little too much on their side of it to do that. So we'll put the property back on the market. It's a little bit of a letdown for a seller when that happens, because obviously you put the property out there on the market, you get under contract, and you think you're headed towards a closing, and that can be a little bit of a setback. But it's not a huge thing, and it does happen. I think as long as you kind of explain to the party that you're working with that it works out okay. On the buying side of that, you want to take the buying side and just give any kind of feedback on maybe what the buyer side looks like in those type deals where a buyer has to cancel.
Yeah, I mean, it varies, right? From a buy side, I think that the buyer could choose to cancel just because they probably did not negotiate the best price within their budget. They probably went higher than they were comfortable with, and they found themselves in a predicament when it came down to inspection and realizing that they don't have enough room to cover those inspection items to repair, and they weren't able to negotiate additional dollars from the seller. So they feel like they're upside down. And then on top of that, when they're dealing with their lender and reviewing their finances, they find that there's less room probably to cover those additional expenses, or maybe the negotiations on their interest rate drop, or the fees for just finalizing the deal just turns out being bigger than they were hoping for, right?
Yeah,
Because let's face it, right? Your pre-approval is a pre-approval. Until you get down to the final conditions on the loan, you don't truly know 100% what your dollar for dollar total is for closing. You have some estimates, and during the contract process with the inspections, you start learning things and you start factoring in what you perceive you must do when you close on a house. Like, for example, I have a client who is getting a house that I have under contract with them. Uh, Part of the house has brand new flooring. It doesn't match the existing flooring of the rest of the house. And in their mind, they're buying this house because it was bigger square footage. But now all of a sudden they see the need and the pressure that they're putting on themselves that they have to change all the floors. Well,
sure.
that's not a must do, right? That's a want to do. And so the challenge there now is, there's a lot more pressure on the deal to stay intact. Or permits. Open permits can be a disaster because of the time remaining after inspection. On this one client I'm dealing with, we have maybe 15 days left on the contract, and the buyer is saying, "Hey, I want that open permit closed." It
Mhm.
happens to not be a big issue. There's a lawyer involved from the title company, their perspective, which I don't want to get too, I'm wrapping the topics together, but these are reasons why a buyer would want to cancel. So
What
I'll
was
take
the
the
curiosity on that permit? What's the permit that was open? What's it dealing with? Is it work that was already done and it just hasn't been closed out by the city?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll get more into it when we get that segment,
Sure.
but
Okay.
I don't know where this deal is going to head.
Yeah.
It seems like it's minuscule and we should be able to close it, but
Mhm.
it's interesting that last night I talked with one of the attorneys, so I got
Mhm.
an earful.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a few of those. Like I said, we'll talk. We've got a permit segment that we're going to talk about that. So just to kind of follow up on some of that with the inspections is when you're doing a home inspection, obviously the purpose of that is to find out, discovery, find out condition of the property, if things are deficient. But you and I both know, unless you're buying a brand new home, new construction, which even in new construction you could come back with some items on the inspection list. If you're buying a resale property, you kind of have to go into it with the expectation that there's going to be some items on that report. You're going to get a home inspection report that may look a little lengthy, but that's what you're paying the home inspector to do, is to go out and to find what they consider deficiencies. That doesn't necessarily mean that the property is a tear down and it's just in complete disrepair. I live in a home that is about 15 years old right now. we've done a lot of renovating to it. But I would venture to say, if I were to have a home inspector come in here today and do a home inspection, he's going to give me a list of items that are wrong with this house. But we live here day to day with no issues. So you do have to kind of, I think, factor that in, in your decision process. I think a lot of times it depends on the delivery. If you've got an agent or a home inspector that is, shaking their head and they're like, oh, I don't know, this place is in really bad shape, and this is what I found, then that's going to scare you as a buyer, and cause, put some cause for concern, to where I think you're probably more likely to cancel in those scenarios. So what I always like to do is tell, on the buying side, is tell customers, okay, let's take a look at that list and let's place the items of most importance at the top, and we'll kind of go down and create a list that we can submit back to that other party, and see how they respond, rather than a knee-jerk reaction of, okay, well, this place is in really bad shape, we're not going to be able to get these things taken care of, kind of thing. So in our situation, we weren't able to address that, unfortunately. But that's the buyer's choice. That's the reason you have the inspection period. And if you don't feel comfortable with moving on in the transaction because you don't feel the property is to your expectations, or you feel you're going to have to put, like you said, more money into it later on, then by all means, go that way. So since we're talking about permits, let's talk about that a little bit. The open permit. I'll let you continue on. We were on that path, so let's hear about the open permits.
Yeah, yeah, good segue into it. So we finalized the inspection piece of the contract. The open permit that's in question, we thought maybe it was a roof permit. It's not. After the lien search came in from title, it showed that it was an open permit related to electrical. Now, this is what gets interesting. The house is built in 2003. The
Hmm.
permit for electrical is from the builder. When the house was
Hmm.
built in 2003 with MI
Yeah.
Homes, it was for the Brinks security system. They
Hmm.
opened a permit and never closed it.
Hmm.
So it's like, wait,
Yeah.
what? How do you
Hmm.
close this? So I've seen title companies over the years do almost like a form where it's like a certificate between buyer and seller to say, hey, we're okay with this not being officially closed because we want to buy the house, and we're removing any liability, right? I've seen that on roofs, or I've seen that in other scenarios throughout the years.
Hmm.
Well, this particular title company is lawyer driven, and they explained to me in a phone call I had last night that from an attorney standpoint, there's too many risk and liabilities associated with leaving any permits open.
Sure.
And in this scenario, even though it's a security system that's not even in the house, it's still an
Hmm.
open permit. And so
Hmm.
we're going to be passing the responsibility of any liability to the new buyer, and then the new buyer will have to deal with this with the next buyer.
Right.
So I talked to the my counterpart agent, and they're like, we really want to see if they can get this resolved with the county. And
Hmm.
so the client's trying to do that today. But um, who are you going to call? You're going to contact MI Homes? Are they going to
Hmm.
go back to 2003 and, whoever was involved in this project to say, why was this left open? The only way to resolve it is to hire an electrician and get it re-inspected to resubmit to the county. And
Hmm.
we're going to pay for that, right? I mean,
Right.
somebody has to pay for that. And is that legit as far as the steps required by the county?
Hmm.
Because we don't have time to really chase MI Homes. So that's the
Hmm.
scenario we find ourselves in at the moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had a similar issue with a property that I owned, as an investment property. It was a duplex, and the issue was the roof. I had a new roof put on during the ownership, during the time that I owned the property, and this was probably 6 7 years later. I was selling the property. This was a couple of years ago, and through the process they came in, they said, okay, we have an open permit, regarding the roof. And I'm like, well, the roof was permitted, not really sure what the open permit was about. And come to find out, there was supposed to be some flashing that was supposed to be put near the roof area that the city inspector was supposed to sign off on. So he was supposed to come out, inspect, make sure that that was completed. That didn't happen during the process. The roofing company was supposed to schedule that, and it didn't happen. So I had to actually schedule that with the city. The city rep had to come out and visually inspect, make sure that was completed. And then they were able to go ahead and close the permit off. But the problem I've had with some of that in our area here is that some of the permits are archived, and depending on how old that is, they don't have access to it, or they've gone to like a new within our Northeast Florida area here. The city's gone to a new digital system to where they just don't have access to that anymore. And that's what they've told me. They're like, well, that's before we started, updating. We've got all digital files now. It's not whatever big map book or whatever the hell they used before that they put it in there. So that's some of the concerns that you have with that. But yeah, I can definitely see I can see the title company or that attorney driven company going in that direction just because of the liability of it. And as a buyer, I don't know that I would want to inherit that issue if it wasn't going to be something that I could resolve. But hopefully it works out in your favor. So with that, follow-up inspections, insurance.
Oh, real
Talked a
quick.
little bit about we talked a little bit about insurance. So what do you got on insurance?
Wait, wait, before we leave open permits, right?
Yeah.
I think that it begs the question about man, you don't give me an old man uh, problem trying to remembering what I was going to say here, because I think
Mhm.
that the permitting thing becomes even another challenge when it comes to investment properties. If you think about like our world
Okay.
when we used to sell cash offer investment homes, how many of
Mhm.
these flip properties do they run permits on?
Right.
They'll
Yeah.
do big remodels and not do a
Mhm.
permit pull.
Mhm.
And that does that could that cause other issues, right? Like I don't know liability wise
Okay.
if there's a way to track down if someone did a brand new AC or put in a new electric panel, if you can chase that person. Have you heard of that before?
Well,
Because a lot of times they don't put permits in.
yeah. What I have had seen and had happen is that a lot of times, that permit's important because if it's not a closed out permit, a lot of times they view that it didn't happen. So for example, new AC unit installed or whatever the case is, and you're saying, you've got a listing, you're saying, okay, we've got a brand new AC unit, but it's not permitted. So technically you don't have a new AC unit installed, at least the way they view it. And I had a situation a few years back where I had a seller that had built a really nice enclosed lanai onto their property, and it was heated and cooled, but it wasn't permitted. And because it wasn't permitted, the appraiser would not allow them to include that in their square footage. So, I mean, we ended up losing about 450 square feet of that property per the appraisal because the appraiser said it's not permitted, so I can't count it in your heated and cooled space. So I know all of us probably want to try to, cut some corners if you can, or save a little bit of money regarding, hey, I've got so and so that can do this work, and they're not going to pull a permit for it. In the long run, when you go to sell a property, you're going to find out that you're going to run into some issues, probably more likely than not, if you didn't pull a permit, to have that work done. I've got another friend of mine that's actually a realtor recently that did a fence in his backyard, and it was to the normal height, but then he built a he shed or something in the back, and it's not. I don't want to say his name or area because he, he may be in violation of the county codes within that area, and I know they didn't pull a permit. So it's one of those issues that if the wrong person happens to be driving around your neighborhood, code enforcement, then they can make you pull that entire structure down. So it can be bad news.
Yeah, they could, but I just over the years I know way too many people or have seen way too many homes without proper permits
Sure.
on
Yeah.
remodel.
Yeah.
So yeah, sketchy.
Yeah, I mean, it happens. Like I said, there's contractors out there that will. I'm not saying that that all of it is, shoddy craftsmanship or it's not good work. I mean, I've got an electrical guy that I have that does some work for me. Now he doesn't do anything that's actually permit required. It's to a smaller scale that I could do as a homeowner. He's just a lot better at it than me. But yeah, I don't get into the whole bigger issues with the permit. So insurance. With that said, with the insurance and follow up inspections on that, I've run into a couple of things lately regarding inspections and what's required to obtain insurance on the property. I've actually heard from family members recently that they've been contacted by their insurance company, and the insurance company says, "Hey, we want to come out and do an audit of the property. We want to see how old the roof is. We want to, have you furnish a 4-point inspection." That's something that typical buyers will do. So, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, from the insurance standpoint, I think that from a rental property standpoint, especially, I'm seeing multiple letters being sent to owners asking for special reinspection and furnishing pictures
Hmm.
just to make sure that there's no hurricane damage to the
Yeah.
properties. Um, and that wasn't the case just a year ago. But I get it. Insurance companies are leaving Florida in high abundance, and insurance is double, if not triple. Over the past few years, it's getting really expensive. In fact, but yeah, the extra inspections throughout the year it feels invasive, and
Hmm.
I don't know about Jacksonville and Northeast Florida where you are, but I'm noticing in some parts of Orlando, even parts of Tampa, Plant City, Lakeland, Fort Myers, Sarasota, like areas that were not considered flood zones are now
Hmm.
flood zones, and insurance companies are saying, hey, or not even a FEMA,
Hmm.
or really the lender. The letter will come from the lender and says, hey,
Hmm.
you were just reestablished as a flood area, so you better get some flood insurance, or else we're going to get whatever's available that we can get in the next 10 days, and
Hmm.
it's going to double or triple the price, so you better hurry up, and then you got to
Yeah.
drop everything and go buy some more insurance.
Hmm.
um, that's a challenge, and it's not clear how to really advise clients how to. There's no proactive things to do to avoid the extra fees. Like, you just have to pay if you want to live here and own.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, in our area here, I mean, so this area, Northeast Florida, Jacksonville area, it's called River City. The St. Mary's runs right through it, and we've got intercoastal areas here. We've got the beaches, obviously, and probably about 6, 7 years ago, I think it was Hurricane Charlie maybe came through, and it came through, and it coupled with a nor'easter and just some really other components that cause major flooding issues for our area. And the the flood maps changed almost immediately within that next year because areas that you had that had never flooded, like 100-year floodplain that had never flooded before, did because of this event. And so now it became a flood zone, or at least required flood insurance, which, I don't know how that works in regards to if they ever take that back. Once they go in and they deem, okay, this is a flood area, we're going to require insurance because of that one event. I don't know that they ever remove that, designation that I know of. I mean, I know they review. I've heard FEMA reviews maps, flood maps every year to determine what areas are. I don't know if they pull area. Do you know if they pull areas back off if you're on there, and let's just say you had one event that happened, over 20 years. Do they ever take it back off the flood zone, or requiring flood insurance?
I haven't seen that. I think once it's established, because isn't it the X flood zone designation is
Hmm.
defined by 100-year 100 years of no flooding.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if it's a
Yeah.
100-year marking, then yeah, no. I
Yeah.
hope to be around in the next 100 years, so I can tell you.
Yeah.
Let's come back to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And Flood X, well, you mentioned that. So Flood X, I always tell customers, Flood X is the highest possible elevation, but they could require or you could get flood insurance for that area. And if you do, the benefit of being in flood zone X is if you do have flood insurance, it's going to be very, very minimal. You might be able to get it for a few $100s per year. It's not going to be anything major. But I've had properties that were next to a retention area that they required flood insurance because of that. Because if it had issues at one time, then they've designated that as a flood area. So yeah, the biggest thing with the inspections that I see are um, electrical panels, fall into an area to where they can cause issues regarding insurance. Challenger panels are like a big red flag. Is that an issue in your area? The Challenger panels?
So not Challenger. We have a great deal of Federal Pacific.
Okay.
That's the
Yeah.
brand that is really big here and
Yeah.
was known to cause fires.
Yeah.
And just you can't get insurance with those panels.
Right. Yeah. I actually have a Challenger panel in my home, and I've talked to several
Nah.
electricians and I've talked to several electricians, and they've told me, they said, here's the thing. I've installed thousands of those over the years, and for the most part, there's no issue with those panels. But at one time, you've had one that's had a defect or something, and that's enough for insurance companies to say, okay, we don't want to insure that anymore. So I know going in when I'm looking at a property to list or if I'm working on with a buyer and I see that panel in there, I know in advance. I'm like, something's going to have to be done. Either they're going to have to replace that panel, or you're going to have to buy a new one because I don't know any insurance company that's going to insure that particular panel. And again, so you'll do the 4-point inspection to where they'll go in, they'll take a look at the heating, cooling, electrical, plumbing, water heater. They look at all of those things, and it has to check all the boxes and pass for you to be able to obtain insurance on the property.
Right.
So it still remains a big deal.
Yeah, and let me add to that, the other items that get flagged for insurance, right?
Yeah.
Besides the electric panel, you said Challenger. I'm familiar with Federal Pacific. Another thing is, man, besides mold or besides termite issues, there's and I'm forgetting the name. Oh, plumbing, the pipes. What is it called? It's not PEX. PEX is the approved, but there's a piping.
Polybutylene.
Yeah,
Yeah.
poly piping is a problem. Insurance companies won't insure, or they're going to insure for a very limited amount of time. You have to get replumbed, is the
Yeah.
phrasing. And last year, I had several clients do it. It was looking at like $5,000 to $10,000, usually about 5K range to get your
Mhm.
house replumbed, and they replumb everything into the attic. So going up into the ceiling through the attic, and then coming down into the bathrooms, washing machine,
Yeah.
etc. Besides replumbing, what else is there that's a major red flag?
Um, so you've got the electrical panel, you've got the plumbing. I've seen some cases of the water heater. The age of the water heater can come into question, and mainly depends on where it's located at. So I think if you've got a water heater that's in the garage, for example, sometimes they'll let that pass because what they're looking at is if it's past its age of life expectancy and it can leak inside the home, then that's what they're looking at. They're looking at the damage that it could create if you've got a 60-gallon, hot water heater that all of a sudden just lets loose and it dumps all that water into your house. Especially if it's on a second level. I had a home years ago that was built in 2005 that the air handling unit and the water heater's in the garage. It was actually air handling unit with a tray system, but it was on the second floor. So those things have to be compliant as well, to where it has some kind of tray system. Sometimes you can actually get by with that. I've seen with the water heater, as long as it has that built-in tray that's below it that protects it. But the tray is not that. I've thought myself, I'm like, how did that resolve the issue? Because the tray is this big, and I'm thinking, okay, well, that's not going to hold 60 gallons of water, but I think it just, maybe it's a buffer before you can get to it. So, yeah,
Right.
it's an issue, and just something that you ought to be mindful of when you're on either side of that, either selling or buying, to where you've got those items taken care of, or at least know that it's something you might have to take care of. So when I go into a home, to list the property, those are some of the things I look at, because a lot of times the sellers don't know that's going to be an issue. They're like, hey, the electric's working great, water heater's no issue, but it could be, from an insurance standpoint, which can hinder your ability to sell the property.
Yeah, there's two more to add to the list. If the home is before a certain year in the 70s, lead-based paint was an
Yeah.
issue.
Mhm.
But then the other one that's during the 90s is Chinese sheetrock was a big
Drywall.
thing in
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
90s. Drywall, yeah,
Yeah.
was a big thing in the 90s, especially like
Mhm.
South Florida. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, a lot of those homes had to get that removed and replaced.
Yeah.
So
And that was
interesting stuff.
because of a deficiency, or not a deficiency, it was a shortage, I think. There was a shortage, I think, in sheetrock with builders, and builders were bringing that over from China. There was some moisture into it. So yeah, I haven't seen a lot of cases in our area, fortunately, but it was confined to a certain, you know, construction
Mhm.
time period, built within that 90 to like 2000 or something like that, I think, is when that really became an issue. So, well,
Yeah.
let's do some kiss, Mary, kill. We've got on the topics today. So kiss, Mary, kill. We've got open houses, virtual tours, and paper contracts. Man, I haven't heard that term in forever. I did hear it, and we'll talk about that. I did hear it recently within the last 60 days, and probably that's been the last one. But so kiss, Mary, kill. What do you have on those today?
Yeah, so I would say that I'm gonna marry or kiss. I think I think I'm gonna marry virtual tours. I think
Yeah,
anything to get buyers off the fence. Let's do a quick tour. If the listing doesn't have a 3D tour, or even if it does, based on a conversation we had in a prior week's podcast, it'd be great to just have a virtual tour so I can dialogue with the client and talk specifically about details in the house live while we're going through the home. I think is great to always have FaceTime with the customers.
mhm,
I think that I have to kiss open houses. I think open houses were great during the COVID years, even though it was COVID, but
yeah,
people were just buying homes like it was nobody's business. And open houses had like lines and lines outside of the home. It was like being at a concert or something, having to check in. It was interesting time. So open houses are key, just for buyers to kick the tires, touch it,
mhm,
feel it, and envision this is it for me. I can live here. Uh, I gotta say that I gotta kill the contracts, paper contracts.
yeah,
Anytime you gotta sit there and actually tell a person where to sign,
mhm,
forces you to not only sign signature wise but initial each page, means
yeah,
that they're going to be prompting you to read
mhm,
all 12, 13 pages of that contract and be able to articulate,
mhm,
sharply, quickly, and in the most basic way, what does this mean? Why is this in the contract? And why is there all these disclaimers, right?
yeah,
Because our contract covers everything under the sun. So that's pretty fun to think of. Let's put that to bed. But of course, we have a digital challenge with our senior age
sure,
population.
mhm,
And shoot, I think I have a hard time sometimes as well with technology, thinking I know what I'm doing and I'm not.
mhm,
So So yeah, I would say that that's the approach I would take on the Kiss Mary Kill today.
Yeah.
What's yours?
So for me, Kiss, I would say paper contracts, and really just
You would
simply
marry
because
it?
no, just the kiss, just a kiss, just simply because I had a really great customer within the last 60 days, and he was not into technology at all. So everything that we did during that transaction was was wet ink, and reading through paper contracts. And it kind of took me back a little bit to when I first started in the business, and I would actually read the entire contract, listing agreement and or purchase and sale agreement, with the buyer and or seller. And I felt good that they were very confident. We've come to a time where, in our time with OfferPad, it's kind of a speed to lead type product where everything is a pretty fast pace. You're sending contracts over, they get digitally signed and then sent back, and it's efficient. But I do wonder sometimes if both buyers and sellers had a full grasp of what they were actually signing. Now, obviously, we're forthright, straight up individuals, so there's no issues with regarding to having someone sign something that's not to their benefit. But I do wonder sometimes when we get those contracts back, and I'll tell customers, I'm like, let's kind of go through it. I'll give you some of the basics, and then call me up if you have any questions regarding that. And very rarely do I have a customer that calls and says, hey, I want to go through this in a little more depth. Sometime maybe there's a line item here and there, because our contracts are kind of set up that way. So the Mary, I'm going to say virtual tours. I mean, I think it's definitely, I say the wave of the future. It's been here for a decade now, but it's definitely the quickest way to be able to get your buyer in front of a property. I've done several to where we've done the tour because they couldn't be here in place, or at the property, and then they've come in later on and they've made some decisions on that. So I think it's a really good tool of getting information on the property and getting an actual inside view of the property to buyers, within a quick basis. And for me, the kill would be open houses, and it's really just because I know that it's a popular thing with buyers, and it used to be with owners. I don't know that it is so much anymore. It used to be almost every single listing I had. Um, it didn't matter what type of marketing I did. I could say, okay, we're going to put you on, Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com. We're going to do enhanced listings, and we're going to do all of these things to push, all kinds of media attention, social media blasts, whatever, to your property. And the question was, well, are you going to do an open house? And I used to explain the benefit of the open house is probably more of a benefit for me as an agent, because I have an opportunity to either cross sell or meet with buyers, and if they're not going to buy that property, then maybe I work with them on something else. So it's probably a bigger benefit for me than it is for them when you're talking about reaching a large audience to bring people to their property. And quite frankly, I've just never had great success with it. I've done some marketing like a couple weeks in advance of an open house and put it out on social media and done this social media blast. And then I've sat there in the property completely by myself for like 3 or 4 hours, and emailed or text or other agents or things like that. So I just haven't had great success with it. I've heard about stories of agents that we had like 10, 15 people today. In my career, I've never had that many people come to an open house. So maybe I'm not putting out the right kind of cookies and punch. I don't know what I'm doing wrong in that regard, but
It's
for
because you
me,
want to kill it. That's why.
yeah, yeah,
It's
that's it.
because you want to
That's it.
kill open houses. That's the only reason why. You're not putting the right energy in the universe, David. Come on.
Apparently
And
not.
those cookies have to not be hard or store
Yeah,
bought. Be
I
fresh in
know.
the oven,
I know.
baked.
Yep.
And then you
Well,
have
I used
what?
to.
Well, wait.
Hey,
You
I
have
used.
one family who shows up with 5
Yeah,
people, and they'll eat
yeah,
all your cookies, and they're just
yeah.
renting. They're just stopping by to be nosy.
Well, I used to do I do it now. I was a big fan of doing a broker open. I would do a broker slash open house, and that would make me feel better because you would have at that time. This was when we used to do caravan, which is when agents would leave the office and actually go out and drive and physically look at properties. Which I don't even think I've said the word caravan in probably 20 years, but that's what would happen. And I would do Chick-fil-A. I would do a nice little sandwiches with Chick-fil-A and the full spread, and it was a big deal. But that was a different world. We're not in that we're not in that atmosphere anymore. So everything is quick. I've got to have it now. I've got to see it now, kind of thing. So a different time. That's all I have for this week. What do you have? You have anything else?
I think that's it. I think we did a good job of conveying some good value for our subscriber base. And I think that the insurance topic and permits was a really good big one. Something we should redo again more with more frequency and detail. So I would just say, I hope everybody has a great weekend coming up. No hurricanes here in
Yeah.
Florida, which is
Yeah.
exciting. We get to
Mhm.
live life as it was intended.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. Okay. Well, that's all I've got. We'll see everyone next week. Thanks for tuning in. Continue to hit those like and subscribe buttons for us, and we'll see you soon.
Take care.